welcome to the Tell Nat Show. I'm Kirsha Fox, homeschooling mom, reader, gamer, and author of Son of Deception and The White Leaf Child. My co-host Julia J.K. Allen is not able to join us tonight, but I'm going to be interviewing author Michael D. Young. Michael D. Young is a graduate of Brigham Young University and Western Governors University with degrees in German, teaching, music, educational leadership, and instructional design. He is the author of several novels. Can you tell me a little bit about your writing journey? You mentioned before that you started writing in high school and you set out to write like a whole book as a high school student, right?
I did, yeah. I'd read so many fantasy books growing up. And it was like, if I tried, it was like, would I just fall on my face and it just be too, just laughably bad? Or, could I actually put something together that's a good story? And so I just tried it. And it took me about a year. And I finished a manuscript. It was actually really, really long. I go back and I'm like, gosh, this is like 2 books. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, and looking back at it now, I do kind of chuckle at some of the things I said as a high schooler, and my I've definitely grown a lot as a writer since then. But
Yes.
it was still a solid story
Mm-hmm.
with good characters, like the whole 9 yards. It's like, okay, so that one I just kind of had to prove it to myself to say, like, hey, is this something I can physically wrap my mind around, or am I kidding myself? And I realized, no, actually, it takes a while. It takes a lot of effort and patience, but yeah, this is something I could totally wrap my mind around. That's
Mm-hmm.
how my brain works. So
Yes. And then in college, you effectively did that again, right? You sat down and you're like, I'm going to write a book.
sure did. I was a missionary for 2 years, so there was a little
Hmm.
break there. Um, Went to Germany and came back. Got married, and that first year back from college, I did the same sort of thing. And my this one was influenced a lot by my stay in Germany. And like I said, it part of it set in Germany, and includes some of the places that I actually went while I lived there. I mean, it's just such an incredible place. You're walking
Hmm.
around. Oh, there's a castle. There's a church that's 600 years old. There's just like whatever. Something like that. And there's nothing like that in the United States. That's that
No,
old.
no,
Nothing.
there's nothing like it at all.
We call a 200-year-old building old, and like, yeah, this cathedral was started in the 1300s. Like,
Hmm.
I'm like, I need a second.
And they're like, it's not even that old.
Yeah. But for example, I went to I worked in this German city called Eder Oberstein,
Hmm.
and in Eder Oberstein, they've got a church that's built into the side of a mountaintop. It's like flush with the mountain.
Hmm.
Like the whole thing is a great big church. It looks incredible, and so there's this legend about it, how it was built by a man who got in a was standing up on top of the cliff above where the church is now, and that he in a fit of rage he pushed his friend off the cliff, and he built the church as a penance for his misdeeds.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know if that's true or not, but like that sort of thing, kind of like, ooh, got my author
Yes.
wheels rolling. And so part of the the book itself is set in this town of Eder Oberstein, Germany, and some of it's in a magic, a fantasy kingdom. So
Hmm.
yeah, and I proved to myself, okay, I've still got it, and this one I felt like turned out even better. So I mean, that was nice, right? So and that one ended up getting picked up by a local publisher here in Utah, and I had my first published work. It was kind of surreal to see, like, wow, that's it's my name in print. So,
Yes.
my professional cover, the whole 9 yards. Like, I done that feeling, and I've been chasing that feeling ever since.
I know it. You open up the box and there is your real book, and it's a real book that other people are going to read,
That
and
needs
it's
the
slightly
smell.
terrifying. Yes. Oh
But,
yeah. If you think like a new book smells good, try your own book. I mean, it smells the same, but it's your book now.
but it feels better. Yes, yes, it does. So yeah, that's pretty
Did
awesome.
you end up doing anything with that high school manuscript you put together, or is it just sort
Yeah, so actually it is available now. I self-published that one.
of?
Uh, it's known as a Past with Two Faces. Yeah, it's a time travel story. I really, but of course, I went through and substantially edited the
Oh,
thing.
for sure,
Like
for sure.
it was, I'm like, I'm not just gonna throw this out in the high school version. I ended up cutting quite a bit of it, so pruning it down, not only on like the chapter, scene level, but even on like the sentence level. Like, okay, you might think all those beautiful flowery words are great, but they really are just bogging your reader down. So prune, prune, prune.
Yes. My first book took about 18 months to write altogether, but most people don't understand that you just like, you don't sit down and just write a thing. You write a thing and then you rewrite it and then you rewrite and you rewrite and
Seriously,
you hit a plot hole and have to go back all the way and fix it. And then there's all the cascade effects,
it's
and
not a linear process. Exactly. Yeah,
it is
it's
not a linear process at all.
very much a tangled web that you weave.
Yes. A lot of people ask, like, are you a pantser or a plotter? And I'm like, I'm a bit of a weaver,
Yeah,
honestly.
I'm a weaver. I like
Like
that.
scenes are out of place and I cobbled them, like, oh no, let's move that. That never happened.
Yeah, so I agree. I often get like I have basically make like kind of rough outlines of where I want something to go, but
Hmm.
100% of the time I think of better things like as I'm doing it. And so like what you described is I have to go back. Okay, if I do that, then I have to change this bit and that
Hmm.
bit, and yeah, it's just such a process. But it's also really fun when you're like, okay, I think I finally got it. My whole house of cards just like I want it. Yeah.
And then you get it back from the editor, right?
Exactly. Then you send it to the editor and like, and you have a minute of like, what the heck am I doing?
Hmm.
And you have a good gloomy moment or two, and then yeah, you
Have some
okay, all right, let's do this. Pick yourself back up and do it
hmm For sure. I really relate to that a lot.
again. That's
It's
awesome.
it's okay to get down and get gloomy and get depressed and have the imposter syndrome, but at the end of the day, you get up and you write. You keep going.
Yeah, it's really that consistency. I think is the most important thing. It's just plugging away at it. Yeah, like when I was in college, man, I was busy. Like I was going to school full
Hmm.
time. I was working as well. I was a newlywed. Like I had a lot on my plate, but it was that
Hmm.
consistency that like I wrote a little every day, just kept plugging away at it. And when I wasn't writing, I was kind of mulling it over in my head, so that when I sat down to write, I wasn't like so
Yes.
that I'm like, okay, I know what I want to tackle next, and so that I tackle it. When I'm sitting there walking to campus with nothing else to do, like this is before I didn't have a smartphone yet, actually.
Yeah.
I would just sit there and think about, okay, so this next a little bit, and use that time as writing time
Hmm.
as well, even though I wasn't like physically writing new words.
Oh, absolutely. That is something that I have heard consistently from a lot of authors, and that it works for myself as well. Because, anyway, I'm a stay at home mom, but I'm a stay at home mom of four kids, and I'm a
Oh man, yeah,
homeschooling
that's
mom on top
busy,
of
busy,
that.
busy.
So even if we're not writing, part of our brain is just ticking away and plotting and thinking about these character conversations and trying to picture a scene and putting it together. We're always writing, even if we're not at our computers.
Yep, absolutely. That's just
Yeah.
how the author brain works, I think.
That is exactly how the author brain works a lot of the time, I think. Yeah. So, in your stories, would you consider them more like plot based stories or more like character driven stories?
Oh man, I of course you got to have fun characters, but man, I love a good plot. I love a good the twisty turny, sort of stuff you might not see coming, that sort of thing. But within reason, you still have to flesh out your characters to give people somebody to root for or to to be against.
Oh, absolutely. If you
That sort
don't
of thing.
have the right characters, nobody's going to read your book, probably. But
No, no, no. But I don't know. A lot of my books start with a premise, like a really cool, like, ooh, wouldn't it be cool if you wrote a book about, X, Y, Z? You're like, that's usually the first thing, and then I'm like, okay, if well, then I branch out to like, okay, now what character would this be really interesting to happen to? Like, what kind of person? And then I go from there, like, okay, I'm thinking maybe a teenager who is, whatever. But yeah, for me as an author, a lot of times it's that spark of that like cool high concept that I then finesse into, okay, the concept is not a book. You got to give that skeleton some
Mhm.
structure on top of it.
Yes. I think I usually refer to that in my own work as like sketches. I start sketching it out, and it's really soft, fine lines and sort of just concepts and imagery that comes together. And then you start writing and you start getting harder and harder lines, darker lines. And then it isn't until like after several drafts that you start inking it in where things are
Yeah,
much more
yeah.
solid. Yeah.
That's part of the fun too. I love world building. That aspect of it is I think a large part of the fun for me. like at some point you got to sit down and actually write the thing, but I enjoy that part. Just being like, ooh, have the power.
That is really frustrating when you have to sit down and write the thing, right?
And I just want to plot.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, what do you feel like some authors might neglect when they write? Something that when you're reading it, you're like, oh, they really could have benefited from something
Oh,
more.
absolutely. Oh, oof. I think one of the things that I've struggled with and had to kind of overcome, and I see, now I feel like it's easier for me to spot in other authors, is having clear character motivations at all times. Like, unless there's a really good reason for you to be concealing somebody's motivation, but like, so that your reader knows what the characters are motivated by, so that they buy into the plot. Like, there's nothing worse than being like, what? He wouldn't do that. Come on, like, you're complaining at the book, as you're reading it.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
that doesn't make sense. You're like, what? Like, unless you're able to pay that off and be like, aha, but there was more to that. But did you consider this? And okay, you could sometimes reel that back in, but if they don't, same with movies, where you're just like, what? No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. And the readers, even though they might not be able to verbalize what's going on, they're kind of like, it pulls them out of the
Exactly.
story. It breaks their suspended disbelief. It just, there's this whiplash moment of why would they do that? That makes no sense for that
You
character.
feel unsatisfied. And I think that goes back a lot to, like, as an author, you need to fill the promises that you're making to the reader, that you set up for the reader. You say, okay, this character has this flaw or whatever, or there's this conflict. That I'm promising you that at some point in the narrative, we're going to pay that off.
Hmm.
And you don't do that, or you do that in an unsatisfying way. Yeah, your reader might not be able to tell you exactly why they feel so unsatisfied, but they will.
Hmm. Awesome. All right. I know you have a number of favorite authors that a lot of sci-fi and fantasy authors share. There's C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and Douglas Adams and
Uh,
who's the other? Terry Pratchett
Terry Pratchett, Terry Brooks.
and uh, Terry Brooks. Yes, I was. They all share the same shelf in my library because to me they all like belong together. It's like their books are friends.
Sure.
Anyway, my question is what do you think that they all did really well that you try to embody in your own writing?
Oh, awesome! I love that. One thing I love is kind of injecting humorous situations into my fantasy, or sci-fi. That's one of the reasons I love Douglas Adams, because he doesn't. It's some of his humor is so subtle, but it's so good. Or just the kind of little ironic humor that he uses. They each just kind of have their own, I would say, special sauce. For Lewis, I love the how he's able to weave in. He uses a lot of characters that allude to Christian characters, but in a way that's not like it's not too beat you over the head for most of them. I mean, Aslan, okay, we get
Oh
that.
yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
think that there's something to be said for taking inspiration from a thing without necessarily, what's the right word? I've lost it a little bit. But yeah, you can use things for inspiration without necessarily getting preachy.
Yeah, and he does that on level one. It's just a great story. Level two, but if you want to look at it deeper and see some of those themes that were informed by his deeply held beliefs, then that was great.
Mhm.
Um, Tolkien. I'm a language guy. I actually was a German teacher for many years. I've studied languages. I write language courses right now for my current job. Love language, and so just uh, Tolkien speaks to me as a linguist. In addition to having a great story, I think that's his kind of neat secret sauce that he's got. And, he's got lots of good stuff. Um, to talk about Douglas Adams, or it's just that understated humor is just so fun that I love incorporating into my own works when I can. Yeah, I don't know. They just it's really easy to have very generic, unmemorable writing. I in myself, I see that all the time. Like I've got to find you got to find your own secret sauce that
Mhm.
that makes sure your writing stick in the minds of your readers long after they've closed your book.
Mhm. I have noticed that there are two types of books. One where you read them, you enjoy them, you put them down, you kind of forget them.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you're like, "Oh, I totally read that, but I can't remember any of the characters or any of the plot, but I think I liked it." And then there's some books that just stick with you so
oh,
hard. Like,
yeah.
you sob over these books, you cry over them. You shut them and go, "Oh, that is so good. Why didn't I write it?"
Yeah. I think I remember having that feeling. Have you ever heard of The Book Thief?
Yes.
Yeah, that was one of those books for me, especially my German background.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. You close it and you're just like, yeah, that's gonna stick with me. I'm gonna remember that one. And
Yes.
why didn't I write that? Yeah.
I was actually an exchange student in Germany for
Oh
about
no way! How
yes.
cool.
When I got there, I realized that my German teacher hadn't really taught us all that much German. It was a
Oh
very quiet
no.
month for me. I did not do very much talking at all, but I very much enjoyed it. Um,
Yeah, that's yeah. I took it in high school and then went lived there for 2 years and was like wasn't very well prepared. Sorry.
mhm.
That's all right. It'll work out.
All right, sorry, I don't want to veer too off our track.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. But that was a neat connection.
Right. Is there anything that you've learned from the writing process or the publishing process that you feel like newer authors might not be aware of? Like, what advice would you give them about the publishing process or even the writing process that might help them in their journey?
Yeah, gosh, there's a lot to that.
There's so much.
I'd say just a couple good ones. One, um, don't neglect honing the actual craft of writing, of learning, studying different styles and learning how to edit, how to prune. Um, I'd also say ask yourself if you've got a thick enough skin to be a writer, because you're going to get a lot of feedback, and sometimes it's really going to hurt.
Hmm.
And you have to be able to pick yourself up again. I'd say also um, make a plan about like how you're going to write. And what I mean, like if you know I've got something done and it's off with a publisher or under uh, consideration somewhere, and like I always have a plan. Okay, that's there, and in the meantime I'm going to be working on this. And and always you know I'll always have a plan of what you're going to do, and how
Hmm.
and like not and say, okay, give yourself some more structure about like, hey, when I'm going to write, what I'm going to write. While this is, or I'm waiting on this thing, I can have this other thing going, and just always have something going. When you've got something submitting, be writing something else. When you've got, and take a break from your writing and edit another thing that you're doing or whatever. Just yeah, make yourself a plan and then stick to it. Make and choose a plan that you can stick to consistently. Like we have these pie in the sky ideas, like I'm going to write for 6 hours today and edit for two, and of course, then life gets in the way. And it's much better to say, hey, I'm going to write for 30 minutes today and edit for 15 or something like that. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's much more powerful than. So you might get a 6 hour session in like once in a blue moon, but getting those 30-minute sessions in more consistently is going to be more powerful over time.
I really agree with that, that you have to have obtainable goals for yourself. One time I laughed and I'm like, well, if I write 3,000 words every day, I'll make my goal.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe I need to adjust my goals a little bit to reflect reality.
yeah. I mean,
I'm very much an optimist when it comes to my own abilities.
yeah, and I mean, yeah. Sometimes I realize that it's also quality and not just quantity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If I just you know re- throw words onto a page, maybe I'll get 3,000 words, but they doubtful to be very good. But without taking some thoughtful time to craft them.
Hmm. Yeah, sometimes you write things down, you're like, that is not my best work. That's me, but all of it. But I'd like to think that no writing is ever truly wasted.
No, no, and you have to let yourself, have a little grace for yourself too, and being like, okay, you know what? But the cool thing about it, until it's on the shelf, it's like you can always change it.
Yes.
Like you can mold it. It's so much easier to work with something once you got something out there. You are the master. You can go ahead and change it and finesse that and edit it all you like. So even if it's not your best work on your first go around, I mean, no big deal. Like that's not something to get hung up on. And it can be really hard not to, if you're not to just sit there and just obsess about like, oh, this passage. You're like, I'm not going to move on until this is perfect. And sometimes you can get yourself in kind of a rut if you do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll put it in like brackets. I'll put
Yes,
this
like come back and look at this.
amazing happens right here in brackets, and then I'll just keep on moving to keep myself from getting too stuck.
It's true. Sometimes you just got to move on. And the nice thing, like you said, is that your brain works on stuff like that in
Yes.
the background. And then like you'll be doing something like I'm washing the dishes. I'm like, oh, yeah, I got it.
Hmm.
Totally.
And it hits you, and then you gotta find a computer or a notebook really
That's
fast.
like right now. That's
Or
like
it's
one thing I do like about smartphones is like, okay, yeah, I can always. I've got like a little notes page, right? Just for my random ideas that come up during the day. So it always has something close that I can access, write stuff.
Mhm. Right. So it sounds like you're a really busy guy. How do you make
Yeah,
time for writing? You mentioned how you like to try to take it in small but consistent increments.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think just looking for those little moments that you might not consider writing. Like so I always have my phone with me. If I'm standing in line somewhere, so uh, I on my phone and I open my Google Docs and I work on an outline that I'm working on, or just those little snatches that they really add up. You take 2 minutes here, 3 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Um, Perhaps you can do your actual writing, or perhaps you can do something related to that. I do a lot of planning that way. Like, okay, I'm gonna just outline this little thing while I'm waiting for my groceries to be checked out or whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah, just taking advantage of those little kind of forgotten minutes that
That's
you might
really
have in
good
your day.
advice. Yeah. That's really clever.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it really does work too. Yeah, you might feel like agonizingly slow progress sometimes. Like I right now it's been ridiculously busy. So I'm in a stage production where I'm there several nights a week, and I have a full time job on top of that and kids and whatnot. So I really have been relying on that the past little bit, just to feel like I'm still moving forward and making progress on writerly things too.
Hmm. Life definitely does its best to get in your way and keep you from doing the things that really bring you a lot of joy.
Exactly.
Hmm. All right. So, what is your least favorite part of being a writer or of writing?
Oh, promotion. I'll
Oh,
just say it.
yes.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And like I it's a necessary part of it. And I like the kind of promotion like where I can actually talk to people. Like if I'm doing like a book signing or something, that's a lot of fun. I love that. It's the I don't know, a lot of trial and error and internet promotion and that sort of thing. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm getting better and better. I'm building my last year my mailing list. I said, okay, I'm going to start a mailing list, and it was just tiny, but I've grown it by hundreds of subscribers just this year. So I'm like, okay, like I feel like I'm actually making a little progress, but it's still just like climbing that mountain and trying things. And some you try something that you invest a lot of time or money or both into, and then just falls flat. And you're like,
Yes, there is a lot of trial of error. There is a lot of juggling, and yeah, it is definitely. I think the hardest part of actually being a writer is finding people to read your books, and you know,
yeah, it's just so busy out there. Like there's just so many people vying for the same thing,
yeah,
same, the same eyeballs, and I feel like, okay, yeah, if I had tens of thousands of dollars to invest in this would be easy, but you know, not quite there yet.
yes, yeah, and then it's hard to know if you're going to get a good enough return on your investment to make it even worth it for sure.
Yeah, that's the scary part. It's like, yeah, like I this may work. This may
Mhm.
just like be money out the door that you're never going to see again.
Yes.
So it's scary,
Oh,
but
but yeah, meanwhile, me and Julia, my co-host, were just like, hey, let's start a show where we interview people and let's make it for free and let's boost each other up. If there's
love
one thing
it.
I found, I believe, are you independently published or only traditional?
I'm both. Yeah,
Okay,
I
yeah.
use some projects. I have several traditionally published projects that I
Mhm.
love, and that's fun, and I'm glad that I am. But then there's some projects that are just like I see that are for more of a niche audience where
Mhm.
I take them to a publisher
Oh,
to be
for
like,
sure.
this is a great book, but it's just
It's
it's
not
very
what
niche,
traditional is looking for right now. Yeah.
yeah, it's very niche. So like things like that, I think makes more sense to independently publish, and then you can reach out to that niche, and you kind of fill a need that you see. So I taught myself a lot of the things to independently publish, like layout and editing and cover design and visual design. And like I'm able to do a lot of the stuff kind of in house now. So I actually find that it's a very fun process having that much creative control over what you do.
Yes, that is one thing I really appreciate about being an indie author is, you get to pick the cover, you get to make all of the calls, you decide every aspect along the way. Uh,
Yep.
I was just saying that the indie community I found has been so supportive. I've made so many friends, and so this is like, I've learned that this show is a great way for meeting other authors and making connections. And honestly, and my TBR pile is just absolutely growing because I'm meeting like
Yeah.
so many fun authors with so many good books. I hope I never catch
Yeah.
up.
It's true. I like okay. Okay. I always ask people like, is it an audiobook? Like, can I
Hmm.
listen to it while I drive? Yeah.
Yep, that's a good way to get your reading done a lot faster.
Yeah, it's I've been doing a lot of that lately. Actually, getting my books made into audiobooks. So that's I because so many people ask me that question. I'm like, okay, and I can finally say yes. I got an like
Yes,
that's
it's a
actually
big deal getting your books made into audiobooks. It's a big endeavor.
yeah, it is, but it's also really fun. Like if you find just the right person for it, it can just really be a
Hmm.
pretty magical experience. Just like wow, that's so cool.
How did you pick the narrator yourself? How did you find your narrator to get that done?
Yeah, so I use so Amazon has its own thing called ACX,
Mm-hmm.
which says, okay, you have a manuscript, you claim your book, like that's already on Amazon, and then you can search narrators, and they all have their like samples and whatnot, or you can just put up an audition, say like, hey, here's the first chapter of the book, I'm accepting auditions. And then you listen to all the different narrators that come in, and usually there's quite a few. Like I get a bunch really quick, Yeah, and you say, hey, you're the guy, or you're the, I like your voice, whatever. And yeah, you make a contract, and you some of them you pay them by the hour, the finished recorded hour, or you can do like a royalty split agreement. Just kind of depends on what their speed is. But yeah, it's been really neat. I've had some incredible you know, end products. In particular, I found this guy. I have this book called A Wonderful Day for a Quest, where it's kind of
Mhm.
a humorous fantasy. And I found this guy who just does the most incredible like character voices, and I'm like, that's exactly what this book needs. Is kind of goofy, very 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 kind of tongue in cheek, but also can also sound very serious when he wants to. This sort of person, and like the
Mhm.
book is just incredible, and it's getting very good. Like people are starting to review it on Amazon. They're like, this is awesome. Like they talk about how good the narrator is, and like I really lucked out with that one.
Makes you feel good to know that you picked a good one, right?
So what's nice is like the use the actual service doesn't cost anything. You have to make an arrangement with your narrator, but a lot of them are really quite reasonably priced, and I've gotten really really good returns on it. Once they're done, it automatically is published to Audible, which is
Mhm.
where tons of people get their audiobooks. So
Mhm. Mhm. It's definitely the dominating, like definitely dominates the market as far as audiobooks go.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's been neat too. I was like, yes, I do have audiobooks, and go listen, please.
Right. Next question is do you ever deal with writer's block?
Not really, you know, uh, and that's just kind of like what I was talking about earlier, where I just am the wheels are turning when I'm not writing. Like when
Mhm.
I'm doing other menial things. Like I mean, I mean, occasionally maybe a little, but not often. I get so invested in my stories that I think I'm thinking about them so much that I'm usually prepared to take the next few steps once I return to actually writing.
Okay, that's good. Um, what has been your most significant writing victory so far?
Ooh, I had a really wonderful experience just this last year where I wrote this kind of this book in a format that I hadn't really ever seen before. But I'm also a musician. I love music. I I put this book together that is actually based on a podcast that I do around the Christmas time that
Mhm.
talks about the history of different Christmas carols,
Mhm.
where they come from, and then at the end I sing them. Um, so what I did is to put it into a book. I wrote I did 24 different ones, so you could like do one a day till from December 1st to December 24th. And then I created a QR code with that went out to YouTube and went to a performance of each of the carols. So like you do Carol of the Bells, you read about it, you read the words, you get the history, and then you can hover your phone over it,
And then you can listen to
and
it.
it plays Carol of the Bells. And so I was like, oh, this is fun. And so I pitched it to a publisher I wanted to get in with for a little while. It was actually the folks at Deseret Book, and to my I was very very pleased that they were like, that's awesome, yes. Like I pitched a lot of things to them before, were just like very polite, no thank yous, but yeah, they went full steam ahead on it, created this beautiful book, had the QR codes, beautiful cover, really nice layout, and then I got to go and do different signings at their stores last Christmas time, and just so many people are just so pleased with that, like the concept of the book, and like, oh, that make it the perfect gift for so and so or whatever. Um, I don't know. The whole experience was just really like affirming and like, okay, you really are an author. Like you do have things to say that people respond positively to, And I'm happy to say that they liked it so much that I'm actually doing an Easter version that's coming out this coming Easter in 2024. So
That's exciting.
yeah, that was a major victory. And like, I it came at just a perfect time too, where I had my wife and I had accrued some medical bills, and we had a couple things go wrong with our home that just racked up all these bills, and this came along and just wiped them out
Right when you needed it.
right when I needed it. It's
It's nice
like,
when things work out like that.
yeah, it really was. I'm like, my writing did that. Like, yes,
Mhm.
like that was a major personal victory. I feel like too.
Thank you for sharing it. All right. What are you reading right now?
Oh, I am listening to uh, so it's an audiobook about how famous musicians died. So like the story of like like Elvis um, and some of these other musicians who kind of were cut off in their prime, and like how the stories about the kind of what led to um, what happened to them. It's really interesting and
Yeah.
very 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 sad. Like
Imagine.
yeah,
Imagine.
you think you want to be famous until you read books about the lives of famous people who get taken advantage of and turn
Mhm.
to substance abuse stuff like that. So
Yes. This is completely off topic, but in my own books, I have angels and demons, and so they're counterpoints to each. So I have the angel of like art versus the demon of madness, and I often talk about how the people kind of find themselves, like they're two sides of the same coin almost. And I think about that
I
sometimes
love that.
because we talk so much about, like, we talk to so many different creatives, and there's sort of a dark side to creativity sometimes where we're more inclined to issues.
Yeah, I think there's just a yeah. I think it does come with its own set of pitfalls. Yeah, falling into to jealousy, into frustration. Beating your head against the wall,
Goodness,
or
right?
like you're not getting anywhere, or just there are so yeah, absolutely comes
Hmm.
with a set of
Sometimes you lay on the floor for a few minutes going, I'm going to quit. And then you get up and you keep going.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. We're kind of wrapping up here.
You
Um,
bet.
is there any advice that you were given that you really like didn't apply to you or you didn't like very much? Any writing advice that you wouldn't
Oh,
necessarily pass on to others?
ooh, that's a really good one.
We do
I
try to ask questions that you're not getting asked every
Yeah,
single interview.
that's great. I love that. I'll sometimes hear people talk about like, oh, you need to just be, know the trends of the market and chase the markets, and just if everyone's writing about this, like, follow the trends. And I'm just like, I can't write about, that may make some business sense, but I just can't write about things I don't care so much. I'm not invested in. You know, I'd rather try to be the trendsetter than the trend follower. I guess that's what I'm trying
I
to
like that a lot. I like that a lot. Yes. Yes, there is, if you can write a book that's on trend, go for it. But a lot of people point out that if you're trying to follow trends, by the time your book is done, there's going to be another trend that's replaced
say.
the old one. You can't chase the trends.
Publishing is so slow sometimes,
Mhm.
especially if you're traditionally published.
Yes.
Man, it takes forever. Edits take a long time. Just
Mhm.
like for example, I submitted. They had me submit my manuscript for the Easter book I did like back in March, and it's not
Mhm.
out for more than a year after I
Yes.
submitted it. Like it's nothing's fast. So yeah, exactly. If you're chasing the trends, they're like, hey, look at my shiny new book that is no longer.
That would have been great 2 years ago.
Yeah,
For
exactly.
sure.
Oh man.
I love to echo the advice of write the book that you want to read, because you're going to read your own book, you
Yeah.
know, so many times.
Yeah, and if you don't like
How
it,
many
then
times you read your own book just to get it out the door.
you're gonna be lost in the weeds for a bit.
Hmm. All right. Well, I'd love to give you a chance to talk about your own books, and where can people find you on the internet?
Actually,
Where can they find you on social media to see what you're up to?
um, I I have an author website that's just authormichaelyoung.com. You can find all my I've got it broken down to like, hey, this is you can look at my fiction, my nonfiction, my audiobooks. I've tried to organize that in a but by series and whatnot. I On the fiction side, I've got a few main series that I've written. The Canonical Kingdom series is the one that I started with, my
Mhm,
main one. Last Archangel series came after that. I've got one called the Chess Quest series. This is more like a middle grade uh,
mhm.
adventure fantasy. And then I've got the series called the Penultimate Dawn series. It starts with The Hunger, which is more of a adult fantasy. Like not that it has bad content or
Yes,
adult
for
content in
sure.
it. It's just that it's more
Yeah.
geared to adults. Um, so that's all in there. I've got a Facebook group, it's just called Books by Michael Young. I have like I said, an author newsletter that I send out stuff a couple times a month usually. And actually, I do want to talk about. I am starting up a Kickstarter campaign here pretty soon, probably, where I'm actually trying to get the rights back for my first two books from my original publisher, and I need to kind of buy them out. So I will be raising some money so that I can bring all those. I wrote the books out into series, and the publisher then kind of pivoted and went to kind of be a nonfiction publisher, and so they didn't want my fiction anymore.
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to get the rights to those books back and turn them into a box set with new covers, new
Mhm.
kind of a new
Yeah.
bit of polish on them. But yeah, I've got a lot of fun prizes there from uh, getting the new books once they're there. That's the audio. The Audible codes for some of my current books, copies of my current books, but all sorts of things. But that's going to be starting pretty soon too. And I'll talk about that on my if you go to my author website or on Facebook or join my author newsletter, you'll hear all about it.
Awesome. Thank you. It was really, really fun getting to know you better and about your writing process.
Oh, thank you. You too.
Hmm. Thank you for listening, and join us next time when we welcome our next guest. And remember, there's always more than one way up a mountain. To be on our show, find us on social media at The Tell Not Show or email us at thetellnotshow@gmail.com. Have a good evening.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach and can be found at hijingsrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks, and see you next time.